So, before you watch this video, I want to assure you of one thing. Julius Malema is the leader Africans need. Africans need leaders who not only focus on the affairs of their country, but the affairs of African people as a whole. Africans in the continent and Africans in the diaspora, including Black Americans, the African Americans in the Caribbean, African Caribbeans, Africans in the Latin America, Africans in Europe. Malema is always the voice that speaks everywhere. You see, he comes to your country, he speaks like somebody who lives in that country. He understands the problems of that country. One time he was in Liberia, another time he's in Kenya, another time he's in Lesotho, another time he's in Eswatini. Right now, in this video, Julius Malema was in Ghana, and he was not afraid to tell the Ghanaians their praises and also their failures. Julius Malema talked about the importance of allowing African Americans to move back to the continent. He talked about the concept of repatriation. He talked about the problem of corruption. He talked about why the Ghanaians did a wrong thing by, you see, overthrowing overthrowing Kwame Nkrumah, you know. This man is the change Africa needs. Julius Malema is the change Africa needs. I just love the point where he acknowledged that African Americans need to be respected, need to be acknowledged, and that Ghana is the gateway to Africa. There's a lot being told about Julius Malema. He's corrupt, he's this and that, but I've not seen a leader like Julius Malema who thinks for the whole of Africans. He told the Ghanaians, respect the black person, no matter which part of the continent, no matter which part of the world you meet them, because black people are the most hated people on the continent. So I don't want to tell you it all, so I want us to jump into the video, watch it, and then I'll give you my thoughts towards the end of the video.
We Africans must hate seeing our own blood. We must always protect each other because we love ourselves so much that we don't want to see our own blood. I always tell them that white people do not want to see their own blood. That's why it's not easy for a white person to kill another white person. If a well-built white man comes in here and beat you up and you are thin like me, don't try to fight fiscal because you're going to be defeated. They are scared of their blood. Look for an object and threaten to throw that object on a white man. He's going to leave this wall running. Not because he's scared of the object, but he knows that he can be injured by the object and he will see his own blood. Africans don't have a problem with seeing their own blood. We kill each other at the slightest provocation. We don't negotiate power. We force our way into power. And in most cases, we are not even the initiators of this violence. It is white people who sponsor the black-on-black violence. Because of the absence of black consciousness, we find it easy to kill one another. Nkrumah did not only develop connections amongst African state and liberation movements. Nkrumah developed connections with African American artists, writers, and all kinds of people who were found in diaspora. That's why a lot of African Americans found resonance and found Ghana to be a place they can identify with as their home. So Nkrumah's idea has always been that black people who are found everywhere must always be in solidarity with each other because they are the most hated people all over the world. It doesn't matter where you find them. If you find a black person in China, give them love because you must know they are hated. If you find a black person in the US or even in Russia, you must embrace one another irrespective of the countries you come from because you are both hated. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how educated you are. As long as you are an African, they treat you like a reject. That's why the unity of Africans, and Pan-Africanism does not only mean those who are found in Africa. It means everybody else that looks African, who's found everywhere in the corner of the world, because those are the people who have been robbed of their humankind. We also know that this country is the one that leads with successful succession, which are peaceful. Of course, it experienced a bit of difficulty at some point, but since then, Ghana became the most celebrated democracy. But the democracy of Ghana is threatened by corruption, a corruption that made sure that Ghana does not pay its international debt. As a result, today, Ghana is unable to self-determine because everything else is dictated to Ghana by IMF and the World Bank, because the current leadership failed to honor their obligation. Corruption is a threat to a wonderful democracy anyway, because it's eating on the moral fiber of democratic dispensation. We must never ever celebrate anyone who is corrupt or seek to defend the corrupt individuals, irrespective of our political affiliation. Those who are stealing from the public purse now, they are stealing from the future. That's why they are unable to pay the debt now, and they will not be able to pay the debt in future. And it is you, the youth of Africa, that are going to inherit the debt, and you will not be able to develop your own countries. There is a tendency in the African continent of the youth defending the old corrupt, because they give them the little money now and they forget the future. If you value yourself, if you value the future of this continent, you must stand tall and unashamedly fight corruption everywhere where it raises its ugly head. Don't care who says what. You must always speak truth to power. It doesn't matter who gets offended. The truth remains the truth, whether you are standing, whether you are sitting, whether you are sleeping, the truth will never change. And one thing you must know is that when you tell the truth to the powers that be, they may pretend now that they do not hear what you are saying. But when they are sleeping alone, their conscience speaks to them, and they must answer the question, is he or she telling the truth? And if the answer is yes, you have achieved your mission. They will never know they are corrupt until someone tells them on their faces that you are for yourself, you are for your family, you are for friends, you are for the politically connected, and you are not for our continent, because our continent is about the unity of African people that is based on economic ownership of the means of production. I want to say this today here, that xenophobic people are people who suffer from self-hate. Because when you love yourself, you will never hate another person. A black person who looks like you should serve as a mirror to you. When you look at that black person, you must see yourself. And therefore, you cannot say the people from Ivory Coast are not needed here in Ghana. They are taking our jobs and our opportunities, because there is no Ivory Coast, there is no Ghana. There is no Nigeria, there is no South Africa. There is no Liberia, there is no Botswana. There is Africa. Because we never determined these artificial borders. Some people went to sit somewhere and decided to divide us. And they did that with a pen and took away our brains, because there is no wall. In other places, there is no fence, yet we see the wall and the fence that doesn't exist. We are unable to break this imaginary artificial borders because our boss told us that we are divided. We are being treated like mad people, where you've got a gate without a fence. All of you, when you want to exit to Ivory Coast, you go to a border, and that border is a gate. But when you check on the side of the gate, there is no fence. Our people are living together. So Africa must stop behaving like a drunken master who goes through a gate in a yard that doesn't have a fence. It will never have a fence because we are one thing. We marry into each other's communities and families. We go to each other's activities. We share cultures. And I know for sure that the people of Ghana dance to amapiano. So why would they think that they are not South Africans, and why South Africans will think that they are not Ghanaians? It's only an imagination that was instilled in our heads by our colonial masters. We have to make sure that as a new generation, we do away with this. We, as a younger generation of Africa, we must not seek to get rid of the old in a disparate manner to a point where we destroy institutional memory. We must always make sure that the old coexist with the young, but the old must be prepared to pass the wisdom to the young ones. For because at some point, the old must die for the new to emerge. And it's not me calling for the killing of the elderly African leadership. Nature dictates that the old at some point must die for the new to emerge. But this new must be prepared to learn from the old. I was in Liberia yesterday, and I saw the inauguration of an old president. I got so worried. But when I saw the vice president, I left Liberia in a very comfortable way, because I saw a generational mix where the old and the young coexist in one office. And I hope the vice president will not be suffocated, because the president must know that with all his experience and advanced age, he has a duty to pass the baton to the younger generation. We call on all African leaders not to leave an office with a coffin. When the time comes for them to go, they must leave without calling the army to extend their term. No one is born a leader. No one is a traditional leader in a political office. If you want to be a traditional leader, go and fight in your tribe for those type of issues. We don't subscribe to people who want to leave a political office with a coffin. We will still give you a state funeral because you are a former president. We will still pay you pensions and give you protection and take care of you as long as you respect those who came after you. You have to ensure that democracy matures in such a manner in Africa, where the previous president does not make it his business to fight the current president. You must allow the new to lead with all their faults because you are the same. It doesn't mean you are perfect. The young ones who are coming after you will challenge the current one. No African leader who is on retirement should lead from the grave. They must all be like all other progressive former presidents who are statesmen at home, waiting for courtesy visits and consultation and attending to honor state functions. Those are the duties of former presidents, because Africa must be stable. Africa must go through democracy at all times. And elections in Africa should never mean the blood on the floor.
So, Julius Malema is a South African political leader, the leader of the EFF, as you already know. One thing which is interesting about Julius Malema, many politicians only speak about the states and the affairs of their countries. However, Julius Malema transcends boundaries. He goes beyond South Africa. He goes beyond the southern region of South Africa. He goes to the continental level of Africa. He even transcends boundaries. Julius Malema is always speaking for the case of the Black Americans and the African Americans. Now, in this particular instance, Julius Malema was apologizing to the African Americans for the wrongdoings of the Africans. Listen to this. It is the Africans, or rather our ancestors who were there in the past, that sold out the African Americans. It was really hard for the white person to know exactly where to acquire these slaves. So we had an inside job. The inside job was done by greedy African chiefs. And it was so impactful to see Julius Malema speaking against this and apologizing to the African Americans. He acknowledged that the transatlantic trade indeed has caused a lot of harm and has caused a lot of problems to the African Americans in the United States, to the African diaspora, let me say so. The Africans in Cuba, in the Caribbean, African Americans in the Latin America, and the African Americans in Europe. He apologized to them, and this is a consequential thing that is going to impact a ripple effect, where leaders are now going to recognize the consciousness, and they will allow, from this they might allow African Americans to move to their countries visa-free to live, because they come from us. They just didn't find themselves over there. So I want us to jump into this video, watch it, and then I'll give you my critical analysis towards the end of the video.
So when you visit former presidents that are alive, you have a duty to also visit those that were revolutionary and they've passed on, like President Kwame Nkrumah. So we are here today to really salute the good work he has done. We did not start the revolution. We inherited the revolution, and therefore it's important to always remind ourselves of where we come from. Prior to European arrival, Ghana was home to powerful empires like the mighty Ashanti, renowned for their gold trade and military prowess. These societies had complex social structures, sophisticated cultural traditions, and well-developed trade networks. An early victim of European interests, the European presence in Ghana began with the Portuguese explorers who arrived in the 15th century, and from then till the 19th century, Ghana, then known as the Gold Coast, became a major source of enslaved people for the transatlantic trade. European powers established ports and trading ports along the coast, exchanging manufactured goods for enslaved Africans captured primarily from the interior regions. The forced removal of millions of people had a profound demographic and social impact on Ghana. It weakened communities, fueled interstate conflict, and led to cultural loss. The transatlantic slave trade left a deep and enduring mark on Ghana's collective memory. While acknowledging the trauma inflicted, it's important to recognize the resilience and resistance displayed by many communities and individuals during this period. However, it was the Dutch, British, and later the French who played more significant roles in the colonization of the Gold Coast, what is now called Ghana. The British gradually expanded their influence and control through trade and the establishment of ports along the coastline. By the mid-19th century, the Gold Coast became a British colony. The scramble for Africa saw Britain and other European countries aggressively giving up the continent. The Gold Coast fell under British control, marking the start of formal colonial rule as a result of the Berlin Conference, of 1884 to 1885. The imposition of colonial rule led to significant social changes. Traditional social structures were often disrupted and a new system were introduced to serve the interests of the colonizers. Furthermore, missionary activities played a role in introducing Western education and administration, Christianity, and a class of educated Africans who often aligned with the colonial rulers while the majority remained marginalized. There are those who wanted to assimilate with the British policies, undermining their own traditional languages, customs, and belief systems, contributing to a loss of cultural activity. The Gold Coast economy also became solely reliant on exporting raw materials, hindering internal development. The formation of political organizations such as the Convention People's Party, CPP, marked the beginning of organized political movement seeking self-determination. Ideas of Pan-Africanism, emphasizing continental unity and liberation from colonialism, fueled the independent movements all over the continent. Intellectuals like Kwame Nkrumah emerged as powerful voices advocating for self-determination. The CPP, founded in 1949 by Kwame Nkrumah, mobilized mass protests and strikes, forcing the British to acknowledge the desire for independence. Initially, resistant to independence, the British eventually conceded due to internal pressure and rising international dissent. Their primary concern was maintaining economic interest and ensuring a smooth transition. Traditional authorities and ordinary Ghanaians, from farmers and miners to students and intellectuals, contributed to the struggle through protest, boycott, and their unwavering support for the independence. The whole continent started learning from Ghana that it is possible. So when you go to Ghana, it is not because you are going to teach Ghanaians anything, because they've seen it all, including leading the first determination of an African state on the 6th of March, 1957. So Ghana, it's a home of democracy. And this country was led by Kwame Nkrumah, a charismatic leader who emphasized Pan-Africanism because he understood that Ghana's independence alone is meaningless. Following the independence of Ghana, all liberation movements found a home here in Ghana. The Organization of South Africa, such as the ANC, the Organization of Angola, such as MPLA, the Organization of Mozambique, such as Frelimo, and many other liberation movements found this place as a liberated zone. And many of them started knowing what a passport looks like from here.
So here's my analysis. As I always tell you in my videos, Ghana is the gateway to Africa. At one point in time, all African Americans should at least visit that Ghana. Go and see for yourself the Cape Coast Castle. The transatlantic slave trade took place there. I'm told that place is very, very horrific. Julius Malema is advocating for that. You see, Julius Malema also talked about the transatlantic slave trade. All the problems we are having in the United States of America are problems that are consequences of the transatlantic slave trade. It's the cause and cause effect. The cause effect, there's something which is always called cause effect. So let's forget about that. I want us to talk about the transatlantic slave trade and how it has impacted greatly on the African Americans and also the Africans in the continent. It does not have to be the African Americans, also Africans in the diaspora. You see, the transatlantic slave trade was spanning from the 15th century to the 19th century, which stands as a dark chapter in the world history. Its effect reverberates time, shaping societies, economies, and cultures on both sides of the Atlantic, the west side of Africa and the east side of the Americas, you know. So first we need to understand the historical background. You know, the transatlantic slave trade was a complex system involving European colonial powers, African societies and the Americas. European nations sought economic prosperity through the exploitation of African labor, leading to the forced migration of millions of people to the Americas. The historical phenomenon had far-reaching consequences that continues to shape the contemporary world. Anytime we see that child being shot, that black child being shot in a Chinese shop, it's an effect of transatlantic slave trade. Anytime we hear of another George Floyd, it's another effect of the transatlantic slave trade. See how impactful it is. This is very, very serious. So the transatlantic slave trade also had economic consequences. So one of the most significant effects of the transatlantic slave trade was its profound impact on the economies of both Europe and the Americas. The black people have built the economies of Europe and America, but failed. They've failed to build the economy of Africa. Because how would they build the economy of Africa when they're not in Africa? They had to be forced to build the economies of those countries where they were exported to work as slaves. In turn, Africa is still down and they built those other parts. But remember, it was forced labor. It was not free labor. Free labor is more productive than forced labor. That one is a word that was spoken by one of the people who are doing the French Revolution. The French Revolution saw an end to the massive slave trade. It had to end massively, but it still continued back then, you know. So the trade enslaved individuals fueled the growth of industries such as sugar, tobacco, cotton, contributing to the economic prosperity of European colonial powers and the United States of America. Remember, Europeans are the ones who went to America, and they also invaded America. You cannot discover a country with people inside. Columbus was wrong. You cannot discover a country with people inside. How? How do you do that? Okay, the transatlantic slave trade also had social and cultural disruptions, you know. The trade disrupted and often destroyed established African societies. Families were torn apart, languages were lost, and traditional cultural practices were suppressed. The legacy of this cultural disruption is still evident in the diaspora struggle to reclaim and preserve its African heritage. You see? Another time I did a video about tribes. Do African Americans have tribe in the United States? Do you guys have tribes over there? Because where you came from, you had tribes. When you went there, you lost that tribe. You had your religion here. You went there and you adopted a new religion. You guys lost a lot. You really lost a lot. And through people like Julius Malema, these points are brought forward. Those Africans who betrayed fellow Africans did the wrong thing. Africa should repatriate, should give reparations, should pay reparations to the African Americans and the African diaspora. All Africans outside Africa who are forcefully removed out of Africa should be paid reparations, because it is us are the ones who pushed them outside, which is something still being faced today. A black person is even racist, even more racist to a black person. A white, now it's no longer racism between white and black. Of course there is racism between white and black, but it's so sad, it's so bad that we have racism between black and black. It will be okay, it will be understandable, not okay, understandable between people of different races, but same races, no. Africans, we have borders. A white person comes and permeates through the borders like he is nothing or she is nothing. But a fellow African can't be allowed. We have self-hatred. We hate each other so much. So much. Leave alone. In fact, here in Kenya, Nigerians are having problems here in Kenya. So there was this lady. There has been some form of femicide here in the country of Kenya. You know, ladies are being killed. Let me show you the newspaper. I'm not just talking. Let me show you. These are newspapers I've been reading for the past few days. First of all, you see? These are ladies who've been killed. This is Kagame. Kagame is still alive, he's not been killed. I'm joking, figurative use of language. Here is the girl, another girl has been killed. There's another girl, but this one is written in Swahili. Don't be surprised, this is Swahili. So, the DCI did their investigations and they came to the conclusion that a Nigerian was found with one of the victims' mobile phones while leaving the country through the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Abuja. A Nigerian was found with the mobile phone of a victim that was killed. So, it is being said that Nigerians are using Kenyan ladies to perform rituals. It's being said that way. Africans are now turning against Africans. I think, to me personally, I think a serial killer is a serial killer. It does not have to be Nigerian, does not have to be Ghanaian, does not have to be South African. A serial killer is a serial killer. We shouldn't identify a certain country that they do this to people. They do this, when they come. No. Nigeria is one of the countries which has the weakest passport in the whole world. Even PayPal does not work in two ways. It only works, you can only send money, you cannot receive money. No PayPal in Nigeria can receive. So some of those Nigerians, it is said, they come to Kenya and they use Kenyan ladies, they use their identification. You'll find that a Nigerian man is having a Kenyan ID, female Kenyan ID, registered on his line. But he's a man having a female. You see, that is one of the problems they have, but it's not enough for us to hate on Nigerians. Africans, we should love one another. Problems will be there with or without the Nigerians or any other African people. You see, the transatlantic slave trade, it affected Africa as well, you know. So we have racial dynamics and social injustices. The slave trade entrenched racial hierarchies that persisted long after its abolition. The effects of slavery continue to manifest in racial inequality, discrimination, and systemic injustices in societies where the descendants of enslaved individuals reside. Okay, the next one is global interconnectedness. How was global interconnectedness affected by the transatlantic slave trade, or how is it being affected today? Let's talk of today, contemporary African issues. The transatlantic slave trade had a global impact, shaping the interconnectedness of nations and economies. It influenced trade routes, institutions, and power dynamics worldwide, creating a historical legacy that extends far beyond the shores of Africa and the Americas. One of these global interconnectedness is that Ghana is called the Gold Coast. There are products which are being taken from Ghana, leave alone the slaves. We had gold, we had ivory in Ivory Coast. I think also we had cocoa in Ghana, something like that. So these are things that they were coming to get, and it caused global interconnectedness. So they knew, okay, there's a route over there, that's how I think, okay? Let's go this way. And you see, we have the Cape Coast Castle over there. When we see the Cape Coast Castle, we think of the transatlantic slave trade. When we see the Elmina Castle, we see also the transatlantic slave trade routes. You see, maritime technology is something that has lived long than the air technology. It's something which is it's horrible. In fact, it's so horrible because we still feel, we have its feelings till now. So I think it's time to conclude now. While it is essential to understand the profound and enduring effects of the transatlantic slave trade, it is equally important to avoid oversimplification and assigning blame to entire groups. Instead, fostering understanding, empathy, and cooperation between diverse communities can contribute to healing of the wounds of history and building a more just and exclusive future. The focus should be on acknowledging the complexities of historical events and working towards reconciliation rather than assigning collective blame. We can't blame the Africans for selling out African Americans. We can't blame the African Americans for not loving Africans, if we have such a thing. And that's what Julius Malema is trying to say. I've only taken the part of the slave trade, which I find very impactful. Because of the slave trade, because we were made slaves, so everybody thought we were weak, we were disrespected. You can't respect your servant. You can never respect your servant. So the world saw us as slaves. You see? They can never respect us. We were once labeled that way, we will remain to be labeled that way. The word Niger is a word that was brought about by the slave trade. So everything is from the slave trade. Yes, the slave trade. It has to be addressed. This message has to reach a lot of people. Africans should get out of that cocoon. Come forth, stand up, love your fellow African. Don't treat a white person better than you treat a fellow African. No. At least don't judge them based on their skin color. We have other criteria. Do not judge based on skin color. It's wrong. It's very, very wrong. Love Africans. Africans open ways for African Americans. And that's how we're going to live peacefully. We always say peace, peace, peace. Now it's on our doors. Let's open doors for it. Let's have dinner with it. Peace is knocking on your door. Invite it home. Prepare dinner for it. And I tell you won't regret. That's for today. Kindly support me on Patreon. Do subscribe to the channel. Give the channel a super thanks. And also see you in the next video.